Hello everyone to our first episode of the Azure All Stars, where we put the spotlights on stars from the Azure community and the work they do in the hopes to inspire others to follow. I'm Amit,
And I'm
and
Luke.
we've got our co-host here, Luke. And in our first episode, hey guys, yeah, in our first episode, we actually have our own co-host, Luke. So we will start with you, Luke. And why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and how did you get into the world of technology?
Yeah, it's always been a bit interesting for me because when I was younger, um, Windows 3.1 was out, so it was between the 3.1 and DOS
Oh
era,
wow.
kind of very early on, showing my age a bit. And I just I loved it. So it was some of the games at the time, and my father brought me a Commodore 64.
Oh wow, I love it.
So yeah, I started playing around with the Commodore 64 on the tape drives, and playing a lot of some of those old games like
Holy moly,
you're
man,
in
you
a
are
you're
really,
you're in a
really good.
forest. Do you turn left or right? Yeah, it
Okay.
was unfortunately, I think in the long run, the tape like because they were 5-inch floppy disks.
Okay.
Um, and I have a feeling that the tape drive, I was about 8, 9, probably around this age. And yeah, it wouldn't play any of the games or the discs anymore. So yeah, we got rid of it, unfortunately. In hindsight, I
Yeah.
think it was just we probably could have replaced the tape drive and be
Yeah.
good. But
Yeah. Yeah,
that's kind of where I started
that's beautiful,
in
man.
in computing. And then when I was a bit older, so couple of years later,
Hmm.
um, I local computer shop.
Okay.
So I went down to the local computer shop in
Nice.
Huntley. So it was just a small town about, you know, an hour or so out from Hamilton,
That's
where
pretty
I
cool.
where I grew up. And yeah, I volunteered at the local computer shop for
Nice.
many years,
Wow.
doing computer technician stuff with local businesses
Wow.
after school, during school holidays.
Commitment, man.
Yeah, I was lucky enough that computers were always quite a passion or an interest of mine. So much that my father, during school holidays, we would have dial up, and during those days, you couldn't ring if the
If the
phone line
line's
was busy.
busy.
And so my parents would always ring home to see if we were on the internet or not.
Uh-huh.
This was back probably been like Windows 98 days. Back
Yeah.
back then. And so because me and a friend were playing StarCraft, because at the time you could dial in to each other's games,
Oh, yeah.
so like a peer-to-peer game. And so
That's really cool. That's really cool to
yeah.
actually have a passion in the same time to actually be working on your passion. It's really beautiful, especially the technology world. It's beautiful that it combines the beauty of the technology and the beauty of seeing how the technology affect the world, but at the same time being the person who's actually building that. That's I think it's really beautiful in our field, and I think it's pretty hard to actually find in other fields. So I think you and I and the listener are real in a really lucky place to be building the technology and actually using it. So that's really cool. And I see that
Yeah.
you've done another thing, which is not just that you've got into the world of technology. You've been blogging since 2012. So that's really impressive. So how did you actually keep that momentum? How did you sustain blogging for that long?
It would probably have been earlier than
Wow.
2012, but my problem is I'm never satisfied with. So at that stage, I believe the blog I started off with was normal HTML, like just static websites.
Wow.
And I believe I used some PHP back in
Hmm.
the day as well before migrating across to WordPress. And so the 2012 mark is
Mm.
when the posts were imported across various instances, because
Right.
I brought my posts through my whole blogging experience by exporting
Wow.
it from one system and putting it into another. And
Wow.
so those dates, um, yeah, I think it's more around 2008 maybe than I actually started.
Wow,
Um,
man.
but yeah,
That's really impressive.
it was first started because I was getting into web development at the time. That's kind of
Okay.
where I saw my career ending up.
Nice.
Um, and it was more for, hey, I was fixing these computers, printers, all sorts of other things, people's home and small business computers. I kept running into issues with software, viruses, printers, all
Mm.
sorts of random stuff that I would come across. And
Yeah.
I just started using it as my own knowledge base, because sometimes it would be the same problem.
Ah.
And so that's where I started, was mainly because no one would read my stuff, right? So it was more me just putting my stuff online. If it could help other people, that's great. But it was more that my own knowledge base I was starting to build at the time. Um, and people learn differently.
Yeah, yeah. I'd say you're being modest actually. I've read a lot of your blog posts and they are really detailed and they're really good. And I love that the other thing is that your blog post is like it's always up to date. Like whenever there's a new technology, especially in the Azure world, I see that when you put a blog post about it, it's really useful, and I like the structure that you put it. So I think I'm a reader of yours, so in saying that,
Thanks. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The other thing that's really beautiful, I found that about you is that you actually maintain a very popular GitHub repo called the Awesome Azure Architecture. Can you tell us a bit about that and like what caused you to go in and build that repo?
Yeah, it was almost the same reason I started blogging.
Hmm.
Was I would go through my browser bookmarks, and it would be pages upon pages of Azure stuff
Yeah,
you know, that I thought, oh, that looks good, I'll read that later, or that's really interesting, I'll put it in there, or I'll copy snippets out of websites and things like that. So a lot of it was based on my learning, the pages that I read, and the stuff that was created by the community, as
nice.
well. And so when I started to look through it, I thought, oh, I can't, my bookmarks are unmanageable because there's just so many pages of stuff. And
Exactly.
I'm quite a nosy person. So as soon as I see, oh, this person's created this new fancy script, or written this new blog post, I'll bookmark it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was just became unmanageable. And so at the time, I saw, other people had started creating, Azure policy lists and all sorts of other
Mm,
things as well. And which is a, like the, which is kind of where I got, oh, actually, this is not only going to benefit me, but
yeah,
benefit others as well. So
yeah.
I started to put together a list, clean it out, going, oh, this is community, this is an official Microsoft resource,
Nice.
put it into a categorization. But my focus with the Azure Awesome architecture list was around Azure architecture, which is where kind of my passion lies. So I was kind of like, right, we need other people to help, with the list as well. Like it is a community based list, which is where like hosting it on GitHub made the most sense to me. But it started off as a combination of going through all my bookmarks and going, hey, let's put this out there in a more reasonable way and help people get started. Some of the links, I was like, why did I even bookmark this? Right? I know I know it off by heart, or I did at the time that I read it. Why would I bookmark it? But then it was kind of like, oh, everyone's at different journeys. You've got people who are just starting in their Azure journey. You've got people who are further along than me. So it's like, let's just put it all in one place that I can go to. The community members can go to, and we can all just benefit, because information is just everywhere. But where do you start? So that kind of was where the list started, and it's just grown over time.
Good on you. To tell you a secret, actually, that's how I found out about you. I was looking over the internet and searching through the Azure architecture documents, and then while I'm searching, I found this GitHub repo. I was like, oh man, that's really cool. And I went through it and I tried to find the maintainer, and I looked at it, and it was about search for your name, and I found that, oh yeah, this guy's actually in New Zealand as well. That's super cool. Yeah, that's really cool, man.
I've had people from Microsoft say, hey, even they reference it as well. So it's things like that go, oh, people actually like what I'm doing and how I'm helping, even if it's just a list of stuff that's already existing. Cool. It's obviously made it a lot easier for people to access as well. So I try and keep it up to date as much as possible by removing links that are no longer valid and adding stuff.
That's really hard. Yeah, I've seen that with bookmarks when like the link becomes invalid. Yeah, so that's like a big task. The other thing that I also find interesting is that you maintain a project called Azure Feeds, which I think pulls in feeds from a lot of sources, a lot of like popular or like non-authors, and also you pull feeds from release of new Azure services. Is that right? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So the project Azure Feeds, so it's just azurefeeds.com. It's a website that is essentially an RSS aggregator. So it's pulling a list of all the the recent updates from community members, so other Microsoft MVPs, just people who are just technologists that have caught my eye or wanted their community content to be delivered. That then feeds, and also like the up-to-date Microsoft Learn modules as well, because it's really hard to go what's up to date or what's changed with this learning module.
Correct.
And so I incorporated some of the Learn modules and stuff, and as well as the normal Azure updates and retirement information. So that's the idea for that actually came from Planet PowerShell. So planetpowershell.com is essentially the same thing. It's an RSS feed aggregator, but for community members working with PowerShell. And so as someone who likes using PowerShell, I've been following the Planet PowerShell for a while, and my blog was actually and still is. Sorry, I was just looking. An author. So
beautiful.
If I do a blog post on PowerShell directly, it will then feed into that list.
Love it.
So yeah, I liked the whole Planet PowerShell idea, but I wanted to do something for Azure as well because it's everything like Microsoft and the community, everything's changing
Correct.
so
Correct.
often. How do you keep up with it, right? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, I use your Azure Feed a lot, and I find that even if I just skim through the, you create a PDF as well, and you put it on
I do. Yep.
LinkedIn, and if you just skim through it, sometimes like, oh yeah, that's really cool. So this service is now GA, or like there's a new preview service that makes like life of someone easier, and I was like, oh yeah, that's really cool. That's something else to maybe look into. So thank you for that. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is that
Mm.
I know that you last year you were uh, you got you became the Microsoft MVP, and that is like a really big achievement. And actually, in my personal opinion, it's a well deserved
Oh, thanks.
award. So can you tell us a bit about your experience through the last year being an MVP? Like, what does that look like, and how did that experience add to your how did that add to your experience?
Yeah, it was pretty unreal. Really, when
I
you
do
know,
imagine.
um, I've always been quite a consumer and passion about Microsoft technologies because they're the technologies that I used in my career, right? So,
Yeah,
you know, 3. Windows 3.1, the Windows endpoints, then became a config manager, um, administrator, and Windows Server builds and things like that. So I've I've always been quite a passion about with Microsoft technologies because they're the things that enable the world and the tools that I've used in
that's right.
in my
Yeah,
own professional and personal development. So, like my blog, um, I I do I do it because anything that I do is because I'm passionate about it
good
and
on you, man. Good on you.
just love to do it. And so the Microsoft MVP award was never really a goal. So
Yeah,
for the context, for the audience, I'm about 1 to 2 hours outside. So I'm based in Hamilton, New Zealand.
yeah.
So that's 1 to 2 hours drive from Auckland, which is where the Microsoft Auckland
Office.
office is based.
Correct.
So I don't have I've never had a direct relationship with Microsoft directly.
Correct.
My engagement with Microsoft has always been through support tickets, through and things like that. And so and being outside of the city center, like being in a
Hmm.
completely different city with no Microsoft headquarters,
Yeah.
um, I never really thought like the MVP was something achievable because I was
Yeah.
never really front faced.
Yeah. Yeah.
I huge amounts of imposter syndrome as well
Yeah.
because, and that's one thing to keep in mind is what you're seeing on the internet is only one part, right? Because you go, oh, these people are a lot smarter than me.
Yeah.
And things like that. And so I was only doing it for just because I love to do it and I love the
Good
community and
on you.
giving back and all that stuff.
Oh, thank you for
And
doing it. Actually, man, it's very inspiring, and it's helping a lot. Helping a lot of other people. Whatever you do. Yeah.
thanks. Yeah, and other people give back to me. It's
Yes.
just a self-fulfilling. I would be doing what I do if I was MVP or not. And
Yes. I love
so
it.
I was nominated by MVP in the States.
Oh wow.
Um, So yeah, around the same time, he messaged me going, "Hey, I really like what you're doing. I've noticed you've been um, consistent, and he could see my passion that I was actually doing it
Love it.
because I wanted to do it, not because I was doing it for the sake of an award or anything like that."
Yeah.
And yeah, he put through the nomination for me. Then I had to submit all the things I did in the past year, and I think at time it was like 60 lines of stuff. So blog posts I'd written, questions I'd answered on the tech community, all
Nice.
sorts of other things.
Nice.
And yeah, and that's one of the things. It's like Microsoft and the MVP program is a global enablement, really, of
Beautiful.
community leaders. But it's and then I became an MVP, and that I got awarded, and that was, as I said, really unreal. Something I never thought I would ever get. And it's helped me by putting almost not so much a spotlight, but allowing people to approach me more than before. It's kind of like we might sit around and or people locally could be like, oh, I need help with their career development, or they want to know about a subject with Azure or something, and it's great because it's giving them the opportunity and the people to go to help.
Exactly.
So that it expands the MVP program has helped expand my sphere of influence.
I love it.
And it's great being able
Actually, that ties in really well with both the goal that you and I have for this podcast, is that we want to put a spotlight on the people that do amazing work in the community, MVP or not, and then help other people in their journey, saying like, you know what, you could approach Luke, or you could approach someone else in the community and then say, what do I do actually to develop my career in the Azure world, or like what do I do in Microsoft world in general? So, and actually that is a very good segue to our final question, which is like, what would you say to someone listening to us now, like just starting their journey, or like in their early stages, and they like maybe a bit intimidated, like see it as too much? What would you say, like, or what would you give an advice for them?
This is always quite a interesting one to answer. I would say don't doubt yourself. That's probably the biggest thing. Like if I was talking to myself, I would be like, don't doubt the value that you have. Don't doubt your own passion for it. And be curious, right? Go and ask questions. Don't be afraid to be silent in the room unless, you're reading it, but just be curious. Go and break things, go and learn, go and ask questions. Just be curious. That's the only thing I can recommend is, no one knows everything.
Yeah.
And cloud changes so much. All you need to do is look at the last 3 or 4 months with OpenAI and Azure.
So
it's gone from, Chat GPT 3.5 is cool to now Chat GPT 4 is implemented in Bing search, so you can go and do that. It's getting implemented into the Office products. And all that's happened within the last 3 or 4 months. So
that's all right. Yeah.
You just have to have a growth mindset, and you have to go, hey, I don't know it, but I'm eager to learn. Let's go and ask some questions, and just don't doubt yourself.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. That's a great ending to this episode. And for people who wants to reach you or connect to you, I'll put your social media handlers in the video description. And so that's the end of the first episode. Do you've got something that you want to talk about that we didn't mention, or like some point that you want to put a spotlight on?
No, I look forward to bringing this podcast along for the journey. I look forward to talking to all future interviewees.
Yes.
And yeah, reach out if anyone, if you want to speak on the podcast, or
Yeah. It's a good
you want to
idea.
share your story. I mean,
Yeah.
we're all here to help.
I
There's
love it.
no judgment. So yeah, look forward to working with you, and
Awesome.
let's
Let's do
go and
this.
break some stuff.
Let's go. I love it. Thank you so much, mate. Appreciate it. That's awesome. Cool. Thank you, guys.